Good morning, everyone. We are now on Perek Yud Mishna Hey. Okay, so the discussion has been Prisbal, which is a document that a person makes, which gives over the debts to the rabbinical court, to the Beis Din, and that protects the debts from being canceled during Shemitah. So the Mishnah says, Prisbal Hamukdam Kasher. Like any document, it was dated. Now, let's say the Prisbal is dated earlier than when it's taking place. It's the month of Kislev, when the person is writing the Prisbal, and he writes in it Cheshvan, a month earlier. The Prisbal is still kosher. But if, let's say, it's taking place in Kislev, and you write that it took place in Adar, then it's invalid. We'll explain soon. The opposite is true when we're talking about a regular IOU, a regular loan document, a document that states that on this and this date, Reuven borrowed money from Shimon. If the date on it is earlier than it actually took place, psulim, then those documents are invalid. But if it's dated later, it's post-dated, meaning it's actually Kislev, and you write in it, wait a second, what did I just say? The loan documents, if it's earlier. So if, let's say the loan is taking place in Kislev and you write Cheshvan, the document is invalid. If, let's say, the loan is taking place in Kislev and you write it took place in Adar, so you post-dated it, then the halacha is that it will still be a kosher document. So what's the issue here? So the issue, let's go back to the Prisbal. Now, as we have been explaining, when you write a Prisbal, the point of the Prisbal is that any of the debts that preceded the process of the Prisbal are not going to be protected by the Prisbal. If a loan takes place afterwards, then it's not protected. So if you write, let's say the date that you put into the Prisbal is earlier than it's really taking place, then you are basically stating in the Prisbal that the power of protection the power of protection already started. Actually, it started earlier. I mean, you're in Kislev and you're writing in a Cheshvan. You're saying you're writing in this document basically that I'm giving over the debts. And when did I give over the debts? I gave over the debts from the date of the that's written in the document, which is actually earlier than it's taking place. So what you really did, you who are writing, you're the lender. You're putting this Prisbal together. If you wrote an earlier date, then you basically messed yourself up. You now create a situation where the Prisbal is only working from at an earlier point, not at a later point. You really have debts that went up to the month of Kislev. And if you'd already written Kislev in the Prisbal document, that would have meant that all those debts up to that point of time would be given over to Beis Din, and they're protected. But now that you wrote, it's really Kislev, but you wrote an earlier date, you wrote the month of Cheshvan, then what comes out is that the Prisbal is only going to be protecting those debts up to that point of time, because any debt that takes place after the Prisbal is written, Prisbal can't protect, can't do anything for it. It's not here, doesn't exist. So it can't pay. Well, I shouldn't say that. It doesn't protect it. Typically, it doesn't protect it because it doesn't exist. But here the point is that it's the Prisbal, if it states a date, that it's up to that date that the Prisbal protects. After that date, it doesn't protect. So if you really had debts after that date, but you predated the Prisbal, then the Prisbal is only going to work for those dates up to that point of time. Well, you did it to yourself, basically. The person you're hurting, you're not hurting anybody else, you're hurting yourself because you predated. And therefore, if you predated the Prisbal, it's kosher. It's not hurting anybody. It's hurting you, the lender, because you predated it. However, I'm a ucher pasal, but if, let's say, it's a later date on it, then it's invalid. Now, if you wrote a later date on this Prisbal, that means to say that anything within any debt up to that period of time is going to be protected by Shemitah. But that's not true, because it's really being written at a point of time where those future debts don't even exist. They don't exist yet. They can't be protected. They don't exist. And if you write now in the document that the Prisbal did exist later and protects the debts up to that point of time that really shouldn't, then you're cheating out the borrower. because the borrower that borrows after the principal is written, there's no principal on it. And therefore, Shemitah can knock it off. By you post-dating the principal and now saying the principal it actually protects those debts even to a later date that is really true, then to use that principal would be hurting the borrower who borrowed after the principal is actually made. And therefore, the principal cannot be used. Now, you'll say, okay, it can't be used for the later date, but can it be used at least up for the date where it's actually taking place? Okay, I wrote a wrong date in it. I wrote the month of Nisan. It's really Kislev. I wrote the month of Adar, and it's really Kislev. All right, so I have a problem there. I got to make sure. We have to make sure that you can't go ahead and use the principle to say any debts that took place after Kislev are protected. They're not protected. Fine, but can they protect the ones that did take place up to this point of time at the point where the principle is actually being written in the month of Kislev? And the answer is no. The answer is once you wrote, basically you tried cheating other people out, or that's what at least it appears, because you wrote this later date. And why'd you write a later date? It's pretty apparent that you were trying to actually create a situation where it would appear that Shemitah didn't take up the debt, but it really did. And therefore, the Chachamim said, the whole principle is no good. They invalidated the whole principle. And therefore, nothing's protected with this principle. You got to write a new one. Another way of looking at the concern is that if I use this principle for the debts up to the point of when the principle was actually written, but not after that, but if I use the principle, it'll appear like the principle is kosher, and it may land up that I actually will use it for the debts that took place later, which would be wrong to do, and therefore they invalidated the usage of the principle completely. Okay, so that's the halacha when it comes to that. So that's explanation of the first part of the Mishnah about the predated or post-dated principle. Okay, now, good. So now we got to go to the next part of the Mishnah, and that is the Shtari Chov, the loan documents. So a loan document. The loan took place in Adar, in Kislev, and you wrote that it took place in Cheshvan. So you predated it. You predated that the loan took place early. What's the problem with that? We know the loan took place. What's the difference if we write an early date or a later date? And the answer is that when you write a loan document for a loan, not only do you have a document that proves there was a loan, so the borrower can't deny it, but actually that gives you a power, that gives you a lien on the borrower's properties. By writing a document on the loan, that now gives you a lien on the properties of the borrower after the loan is done, or as long as the loan hasn't been paid. Now, what that lien means is like this. If after the loan was done, or as long as the loan hasn't been paid yet, the borrower now takes a piece of real estate and lends it to somebody else, and sells it to somebody else. Okay? And then comes the point of time where the borrower says to the lender, can't pay, I have nothing to pay you. So because the lender has a lien on that property, even though it was bought by someone else, he could actually take it away from that buyer because he had a lien on it he has a lien on it for as long as the debt exists. As long as the debt is existing, there is a lien on that property. Now, if the property was bought after the loan was made, the debt doesn't get a lien on it. Any properties that were present when the loan was made, there's a lien on that property as long as the loan hasn't been paid up. Okay, well, so it comes out, and so the halacha is that if the borrower does not pay the lender at a certain point, the lender now goes and takes those properties away from the buyer. He got a lien on it. And then the buyer goes back to the borrower and says, give me back my money. Now, if you write the time of the debt earlier than it took place, then basically you're saying that the lien goes back to that earlier time. Now, if somebody bought that piece of real estate before the loan was made, there's no lien on it. But by predating the loan document, that implies that there is a lien on it going back to that point of time. And that piece of land that was bought in the month of Cheshvan had a lien on it. and you will now wrongfully take that away from the buyer. And there the Chachamim said, the predated loan document, puzzle, it is invalid. You cannot use it. You cannot use it even for a lien on a property that was there during the time of the loan. Not only do we say, of course, you can't use it to go back to the date when the loan was even existing, but you can't even use it for when the loan did exist, because that's what they did. They invalidated that document. If we're going to let you use the document for the lien on the properties that actually were there, were present in the borrower's ownership during the times of the loan, if we use this predated document to allow to be able to collect the lien with that document, well, the document has an earlier date. If we let you use it, you may end up using it for the earlier date, which means for a property that was bought by someone from this borrower before the borrower actually borrowed the money from you, you may use it for that, and that would be wrong. So therefore, they invalidated the document completely. There's an interesting discussion as to whether you can even use this document anymore as a proof for the loan. Forget about the liens. Can you even use this document as a proof that there was a loan made? There's an argument amongst the Rishonim, the early authorities, as to whether perhaps this entire document in its entirety is invalid. You can't even use it as a proof that the loan even took place. Okay, but if let's say it's mu'ucher, let's say that the date on the loan document is post-dated, it's made for a later time. Well, if it's made for a later time, who loses out? The lender loses out. By allowing a later date to be put on the loan document, what comes out is then that according to the loan document, the loan took place later than it actually did, and it doesn't include, and it doesn't say anything about the land that was bought from the borrower when the borrower actually did borrow the money. It doesn't say it. So the lien isn't put on. It comes out. You don't have anything to create the lien on that earlier property. If the document says that the loan took place in the month of Adar, then the lien only takes place on the properties from the month of Adar. Even though you actually borrowed the money earlier than Adar, you borrowed the money in Kislev, and therefore you should have a lien on any properties at that point. But the loan document doesn't say that. The loan document only says the loan took place later. Therefore, your liens only start on the lien can only work from the point mentioned in the document. Therefore, there's no lien on any of the properties earlier, even though those properties were in the presence of the borrower when he lent you the money, and this piece of land was sold after the loan actually took place, but before the time in the document. So the only person who loses is the lender who allowed this document to be post-dated. So it's still kosher. It's going to be a kosher document, but you won't be able to use it as you should have been able to. All right. Next case. One person borrowed from 5 people. A principal has to be written for each and every loan. Very simple. The whole point of a principal is that the loans are given to the custody of the Beis Din. So one person borrows from 5 different people. Okay, that's 5 different people have a debt on this person. They each one need to protect his debt. So each one has to write a principal to give over the debt that he has on this person to the Beis Din. If you have 5 people that have borrowed from one person, ain't a case of a principal echad lekulam. The lender only has to write one principal for all of them. Because again, the point is that I give over the debts to Beis Din. It doesn't make a difference how many people I have debts on. I take the debts, I give them to Beis Din. I can do that all in one principal. And therefore, when you have 5 people that have borrowed from one person, he writes one principal for all the debts that he has on different people. And that will protect all of them from Shemitah cancellation. Okay. Mitzvah Mem Gimel. Mitzvah Sloisase Shalahaka Shem Adam Yisrael. It's a prohibition against striking another Jew. The warning for this, where does the Torah tell us you can't strike someone? It comes from the pasuk that says, Lo Yosef, he should not continue, he should not add more. That pasuk is talking about the following. A person deserves what we call malchus. He deserves lashes. The Beis Din is going to administer lashes for a prohibition he committed. The maximum amount of lashes is 39. But the halacha is that the Beis Din looks at this person and sees how many lashes can he really survive. And according to that, that's the amount of lashes he's given. The Torah tells the person, the agent of Beis Din who's administering the lashes, if you may not add an extra lash, whatever the Beis Din determines that this person deserves, you give that amount, you may not give extra. There is a prohibition on doing so. And actually, it's possible. Well, let's go through there. Okay, these words, not to add more, is a warning in general, not to strike a Jew. The kal v'chomer, and this can really be derived from what's called a kal v'chomer, from looking at something that's considered more light and more strict and more stringent. And you'll see what that means. Malchus. Here, the pasuk is talking about a person who deserves lashes, meaning he deserves to be beaten. The Torah gave permission to beat this person. There, the Torah said, don't do more than you should, than you may. There's a prohibition to hit the person more than you may. This person already got permission to strike him. So I give him one more. No, you can't give him one more. Even that you can't do, kal v'chomer, all the more so, l'sha'ar kol adam, to any other person who doesn't deserve to be beaten, that you can't beat him. Now, hamakas chaverei hakosh she'ema shava pruta loika. Now, let's say when you beat this person, the wound that you make in him does not cause a damage that would be a value of a pruta. We've spoken about a pruta is the minimum value that the Torah considers a value or a significant value, even though it's very small. Nonetheless, smaller than that is too insignificant to bother with. And therefore, if at the end of the day, you struck this person, you damaged him. When you damage a person by physically beating him and hurting him, there are damages you have to pay to him for it. But if the damage that you did was less than a shava pruta, so there's not going to be any kind of collection of money because, as we said before, the rabbinical court does not get involved in trying to extract money from a person when the liability is only less than a pruta. However, being that you're not paying, you'll get lashes. The act you did was a prohibited act, and therefore it carries lashes. So if you hit the person, you're going to get lashes, but only if the damages would be less than a pruta, because then at the end of the day, no one can make you pay. But let's say the damage that you did to this person is the value of a pruta, pirish, which Chavetz Chaim means to explains. You gave him a big enough beating or big enough wound that now the payment for that damage is going to be a pruta or more. Being that now at the end I have the obligation to money, I actually have to pay the money, then you don't get lashes. That's a rule. There's a rule in the Talmud that says if for one act you have to pay for that act, and it also is an act that potentially carries lashes, you don't do both. If you pay, you don't get lashes. The lashes is for the prohibition, for the fact that you transgress the prohibition of the Torah. The payment is for the damages, but that's the rule. If in this one act, there will be a payment for what you did, then there's not going to be lashes for it. But if there is no payment for it, then there will be lashes. That's the difference between when you damage the person less than the value of a pruta or more. Less than the value of a pruta, there's no, call it, real obligation to pay. Well, then you get lashes. But once there is a real obligation to pay, an obligation that the Beis Din could actually force you to pay, extract it from you, then the halacha is that you will not get lashes and be paying. Doesn't mean you didn't transgress the prohibition. You have transgressed the prohibition, but the punishment of lashes isn't applied. Even if you just lift up your hand to strike someone, you're called a rasha. That's what we find in the Chumash, that when Moshe came upon the Jews fighting with each other, and Moshe said to one rasha, evil one, Lama Sakarecha, why are you striking your friend? Our sages say he never actually struck him. He was about to strike him, and Moshe still called him a rasha, an evil person. But if, let's say, you are striking someone in order to discipline or educate, which was something that used to be done, very commonplace, you're not transgress. That's not considered, again, depending on the situation, that's not considered hitting person for no reason. That kind of hitting is going to be the same way you can strike a person to administer the malchus, the lashes that he's liable for a punishment, for transgressing a prohibition. If the reason the striking is being taken place is in order to discipline or to educate, again, then the transgression does not apply. Wish you all a wonderful day and take care and be safe.